think other efficiencies other.
So the path that I was trying to figure out is yeah.
So on the second, that's right. Yeah. Mine are getting wrapped up.
Yeah, it's fine. That's
The only damage was my hair.
It blew all over the place, huh? Scary situation. It's just the way that. So he's got a bottle.
I think Sharon dropped off. He was on there. Yeah. Maybe.
Okay, I think we're about ready to get started. Sorry for the delay. All right, let's go ahead and go on the record or begin our presentations. My name is Nancy DePel. I'm the regulatory law judge running the RTO public meetings this morning. We've come here today for a public meeting with MISO and SPP, and we've been having these quarterly meetings. Today's meeting is basically virtual. Our presenters are going to be virtual today, as well as some of the commissioners. I would ask that anyone online be sure and mute your microphone unless you need to speak. That'll keep things cleaner. And anyone in the room, if you could mute your portable devices so as not to interrupt. We'll basically proceed this morning. I don't know if the commissioners had any opening remarks. I don't believe so. So we will basically begin with, I think SPP is going to go first, and then MISO. After the presentation, I'll open it up for commission questions. Of course, commissioners, if you have questions along the way, I'm certain they'll be entertained. And after commission questions, I'll ask if there are any staff questions. Usually OPC, if anyone is present, then other utilities and other parties, if anyone is present that would like to ask questions. So with that, I think we'll just go ahead and turn it over to SPP. If you could just, for those of us in the room, introduce yourself and so forth before beginning your presentation, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. I'm Kim O'Gwen, Senior Director of Regulatory Policies here at SPP. I'm also accompanied by Yasir Abbas. He is Senior Director of Operations, and Garrett Crossan, who is also an Operations Manager. I don't know your official title, but he's Manager in Operations. And then also Munshira Blank, also virtual, is our Manager of Regulatory Affairs. And so we really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today and the time to allow us to share just some updates of what is going on with SPP. Before I turn it over to Yasir, who will be leading the discussion today, just wanted to also tell Chair Hun, thank you for the work she's doing. I'm sure you all are aware of all of the great things that she is involved in at SPP. She's leading several efforts here, including our cost containment and allocation and evaluation review team, the CARE team. She's doing an exceptional job with that, as well as she's leading our regional allocation review task force. And so we have her very busy, and I know you all are very busy at the Missouri Commission as well. So thank you all for allowing her to spend some time with us to help us continue creating and developing great policies. Also want to highlight the work that your COG members are doing, our cost allocation working group. Adam and Rich, Cecil and Rodney all do a great job supporting our efforts here at SPP. So just really want to highlight them and tell you all thank you. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yasir so we can go through today's presentation.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners and everyone else on the call. I'm excited to be here and present SPP and give an update on SPP, what's been going on from an operations standpoint. Today, what we'll cover is, and first, Kim introduced me already. I am the Senior Director of Operations Support at Southwest Power Pool. What I'm going to cover today is a few main areas. First, I'm going to cover our Mercy Energy processes, just kind of give a highlight and a reminder for what those means and the progression and how we go about communicating those things. Second thing is we would like to tie that into talking about SPP performance during the Winter Storm Fern that took place last month. The third thing I'd like to cover is our preparedness effort for the summer of 2026. Those efforts are well underway, and I'll touch up on that and talk about them. And finally, I'll wrap it up with our long-term reliability assessment as published by the MRO for SPP, covering SPP. So I'll highlight some of the keynotes and takeaways from that report. But first, before I start, I just want to mention throughout these events and throughout our practices at SPP, our mission and objective is to work together with our stakeholders to responsibly keep the lights on and do that reliably and economically. And that certainly is the practice that takes place on a daily basis and was the practice that we proceeded with and followed during Winter Storm Fern. So I just wanted to highlight that one. The next slide. All right. Give an overview. That would be slide 3.
Did I do it?
You got it. Just a couple of clicks down.
Oh, I did that.
Excuse our technical difficulties here. 1 second.
Maybe I have to scanner. What? Not moving. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so first I'd like to talk about our NERC's energy emergency alerts. The EAs is what you'll hear 'em, being referred to. These alerts were developed by NERC, and the emphasis from NERC when these alerts were developed is to create clear, standardized emergency communication. The other emphasis is to have a consistent operating procedures across regions. So when you're in one of these alerts, there are certain steps that you undergo, and the NERC's intent was to make that consistent across all regions. And it also serves as a mechanism for creating an early warning, earlier alert system for progression of severity of any grid conditions. That's the grid conditions being anywhere from curtailments to load shed. We didn't get anywhere close to that in these recent events. These emergency conditions are triggered dependent on what we see operationally from a reserve margin standpoint. So we look at our supply and we look at the demand and we look at the uncertainty that we're dealing with at any given time. You're going to hear me use the term uncertainty a few times because that is a key component of our assessment from an operations standpoint of what we projected and what we forecast in our region. So when those things are assessed together, it kind of dictates and drives and tells SPP what condition we should be in, whether that's a normal condition or some sort of alert or somewhere in between. And I'll talk about what those progression of those alerts and advisories look like. But ultimately, the purpose here for these alerts is it allows us to monitor grid conditions. It allows us to signal any tightening supply, coordinate regional efforts and assistance between SPP and others, and ultimately it's just to keep the lights on, right? Prevent any uncontrolled outages and provide transparency to the stakeholders, regulators, and to the public as well. We do make those notifications available out beyond just the industry. So we think this is an important framework that we have in place. It really creates a transparency from those outside of SPP to looking in to really get a feel for what's going on operationally within the region. Okay, next slide. And speaking of communicating those things, it's really important for SPP, and we've done some work here in the last few years, especially since Uri, in making sure that the alerts are made available and they're made public, and we've done a good job of making sure that that's communicated with on our SPP website, but also across various internet platforms and social platforms for everyone to be able to consume that information, including the general public. So the current grid conditions can be found on spp.org. This is the place that ultimately has the most up-to-date information. Again, the grid conditions can be reflected via email notifications to our stakeholders, to regulators, but ultimately it all takes you to this page that will have the current grid conditions at any given time from SPP's standpoint. And I'll give a plug to the mobile app. SPP also has a mobile app that has information that you can have on the go to stay up to date on grid conditions in the SPP region. Let's go to next. Okay, so beyond the posting, and I kind of touched up on this, we also have distribution lists. So anytime we do grid notices or emergency communications, or anything that requires communication outside of SPP, we have exploder distribution lists that we recommend that everyone signs up for these distribution lists. Just another way, another method and interface that you would have to get the most up-to-date information from SPP with respect to the grid conditions. And I already talked about the mobile app, and I think that's a really helpful place to have it on the go, since in today's day and age, everyone has their phone on them, and I think that's, from my view, that's a good place. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so talk a little bit about what the EAs are in general, what their intents are, and I talked about how we communicate various alerts and advisories and conditions for SPP. So let's talk about the progression. And this is something that you'll see published when we talk about grid status, and I think it gives a good view for what the escalating approach that we have and the progression of SPP's conditions. So we can go anywhere from what's considered normal And in normal is really normal operation. There may be weather advisories, there may be some advisories that we're monitoring closely, but we'd consider that system to be the conditions to be normal. And then it could escalate and progress into stable status, which is the yellow there. And conservative operations advisory kind of fall within that. I just want to be clear that when we are in normal and the stable conditions, resource advisory and conservative operations advisory, we do start taking some actions, right? The actions are intended to mitigate and prevent us from escalating beyond these states, right? So these are the advisories that allow us to take some action on certain assets that we need to take action on to prevent those progressing into other conditions. And then we can go into minor risk, which is, from our view, it is minor risk, but this is not a condition we like to be in. It's Energy Emergency Alert 1. And then you go on to the 2 and to the 3 alerts. I'm going to touch up on what those are and how they differ on a few slides. Ultimately, we want to stay on the left as much as possible, as much as we can help it, and we'll take all the appropriate actions that we need to take, including long lead commitments of generation to stay in the normal region of this grid condition. Let's go to the next slide. And the next slide will go on in details about some of this stuff. I am not going to go through the matrix here. I think you wouldn't like me to do that. So what I'll do is I'll just highlight the differences and some of the key actions that we take in these different levels. Feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions or would like any clarification. Happy to do that and answer any questions. So as in a normal region, there's the normal stable, nothing's going on, just like today. Or there is, we could escalate it to weather advisory. Weather advisory indicates that SPP is monitoring some weather front or conditions that may pose some risk on SPP assets, whether that's generation or transmission. So we'd generally go there just to say that, you know, be aware, stay close to SPP and make sure that what you're ready in the case that we need to escalate this to a resource advisory. Again, that generally highlights any conditions that we see from a weather impact standpoint. Or we can escalate it to resource advisory. Resource advisory could be because of severe weather. It could be that we're projecting significant outages or high uncertainty expected in our region. And uncertainty could be because load forecast uncertainty, generation availability uncertainty, or wind uncertainty. So that's the difference there between the weather and the resource advisory. And then we can also go to conservative operations. Conservative operations is when we start to really indicate to the region, to our stakeholders, and to the public that we're operating conservatively. So what that means is that we are likely going to start either delaying outages, maintenance outages on transmission generation, or recalling outages. This is also the time when we start committing long lead resources in our region. And again, long lead resources meaning that we would actually start making some commitments earlier than our normal day ahead process that could be many days out in preparation to make sure that those resources are there, are available, and ready to mitigate any conditions that we may be dealing with. So conservative operations, as the term applies, is that we are operating conservatively and we're taking certain actions as appropriate. I will highlight that for all of these things, and I mentioned that earlier, we post for stakeholders, we post for on Oasis on various platforms. And the idea for posting is really to make sure that our market participants, our participants in providing supply or demand in our region, know the conditions that we're dealing with so that they can get ready to either assist with making transactions and assist in mitigating some of these conditions, or indicating that for other markets and regions next to us. And certainly this is something that you'll see in most events. I will highlight that none of these advisory levels, it is a progression, but it doesn't mean that we have to go in that progression. So if something comes up and then we have to be in conservative operations, we will be in conservative operations without having gone through the resource advisory. But it means that we'll take the same actions, it's just we'll take more actions at one time.
And I'll just note on the regulatory front, this is when you'll receive an email either from someone for regulatory, generally it's myself. We send an email to our regional state committees to alert them that we are in conservative operations. And so at this point is when the commissions typically will start receiving notices of the update in the SPP footprint.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so that was, if you recall from that progression, let's go one more slide back.
Oh, did I
Let's go
click
one.
too? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. No, the other way.
Oh, I don't know why.
There you go, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're getting to the orange region, if you remember that progression bar. So that I start to going into the EEAs, Energy Emergency Level Alerts, and Alert Level 1. When we are in Alert Level 1, we really are indicating, and we're in the state that we have made all available resources available to our market and have committed all that generation. So if we recall in Conservative Operations and Resource Advisory, we're making predetermined commitments to get us to a place where we are ready to mitigate any risks. But when we get to an EEA 1, it means that we have committed everything that is available to us, right? So that is an important indication, meaning that any escalation of load forecast or degradation of any generation availability, it could be problematic from a supply-demand balance standpoint. We were not in EA level 1 alert in this winter event. So that's a good thing. We don't want to be in there. But when we are in this alert, we do make certain actions, including curtailing non-firm transactions that are being exported out of SPP to maintain balance. And like everything else, we make this postings available to the industry, to our stakeholders, and also to the regulatory bodies to make sure that everyone is aware. Then we go to EA level 2. EA level 2 is a
I'm sorry.
stepped up. No, you're good. I'm not sure what's going on.
It's like every time I click, it'll go. Let's see.
There you go. All right. So EA level 2, this is when we may require action from the stakeholders, including public, and this is the highlight of EA level 2 is we may tap into the demand response program, ask for demand response program to be effectuated. Public appeals are issued during EA level 2. And so this is an important level where we really increase our communication even further to make sure that we are doing everything we can to conserve energy, to deploy demand response programs that may exist. And again, when you're in this state, you are trying to save basically from being in load curtailment, trying to maintain your reserve margins. Doesn't mean that you are in shortfall at this point. If you're in shortfall, you go to EA level 3, but you're doing other escalating action, including public appeal in EA level 2, to make sure that you're maintain your supply sufficiency. So public appeal, I'll just touch up on that really quickly. That's the next slide. Public appeal for conservation. This is something we do in EA level 2. We have various communication methods to our stakeholders to do that. X Matters is a platform that we have. It blasts out messages on calls. We make this information available on various platforms, on public platforms, including the SPP website. Again, public appeal is something we don't want to get to, but if we are in EA2 and we think it is necessary, we would absolutely be in this state and make sure that everyone is aware we are in that state and in that stage of emergency mitigation. And last but not least, and that will take us to EA level 3. So EA level 3 is the condition that we were in. Here we go. EA level 3 is the conditions that we were in during Uri. The only time we were in EA level 3. We have not been in EA level 3 since Uri, which is great news. This is when we start to actually tap into our reserve margin in operations. And we really are just trying to balance generation and load. This is also the level when we would start curtailing firm obligations, whether that's exports obligation or load obligation. And obviously with that comes a lot of notification and making things available, just like the other alerts, but even at an escalating point, because it does require action from our stakeholders, from the TOs, and from the load responsible entities.
And when you say you start firm, can you kind of give a better understanding of what firm is?
Yeah. There in the industry, there's the non-firm products and a firm product. A firm product is either a generation, when we talk about firm products, we're talking about load in this case, that has procured all and gone through all the processes to get the best quality supply that it can get. It has transmission, it has the resource adequacy requirements, it has everything that it needs to be considered firm and has the highest quality and highest chance of being served. This is why if we go to an EA level 3, we really are tapping into those loads that have procured everything that they could procure ahead of operations in the planning reserves and the resource adequacy realm. So they're really procuring the highest quality seats. Almost like if you think about an airline model, you have the firmest seat, nobody can bump you, right? And so this is the case for firm load. The only way you can get bumped is, an analogy is that the flight is delayed, or if the flight is canceled, EA level 3 is akin to that. All right, that's perfect. Yeah, we got it right this time. Okay, so when we go through these conditions, various impacts to the region, various impacts to the stakeholders, really, most of them don't require a lot of action until we get to those EA level 2 and level 3. Actions that are required is really from SPP to the stakeholders, making generation available, taking long lead commitments ahead of our day ahead market and so on, which has different consequences from a market impact and pricing standpoint. But all of this will have impact on the market. So first thing I'll talk about is the market prices, the local marginal prices in our market. When you have supply and demand tighten up, you'll likely be seeing with elevated energy prices, right? You are higher in the stack of the generation that you have available to you in the market. So that means you are tapping into your expensive generation to serve your load. Absolutely, we would do that for reliability. It's not a decision we would make and decide to curtail load so we don't have tapping into the high expensive generation, but it does come at an impact and a potential cost, and that would be higher energy prices. We certainly see that during weather events or during summer heat waves. Scarcity pricing is a consequence of all these conditions, right? So if we get into being short reserves or short some other products that go along with all of that during these tight conditions, scarcity pricing indicates that we are going to see elevated pricing, indicating that there is a shortage of a product, and that will impact the marginal prices and essentially the fuel cost procurement for your customers if they're buying from the market. I talked a lot about long lead commitments, and I talked about SPP making commitments for reliability purposes to mitigate uncertainty. That also could come at a cost of uplift, right? There is a risk that when we make those commitments to mitigate risk, and that risk doesn't materialize, those generation may actually need to be what we call made whole, right? They were called on, but they weren't necessary. They weren't able to procure all the revenues from the market. So it goes into this concept of uplift. We'll come back and we say, we'll hold you harmless to your costs and we'll uplift that. We generally do see increased uplift during these events. All of this, what it could mean for ratepayers from your perspective, it could have an impact on the ratepayers on the fuel cost front, right? So if you are buying energy from the market, and the market is dealing with higher prices, the ratepayers could see an impact on there from a fuel cost view. It also could mean that there could be long-term investment cost increases, right? So this is especially the case if we see that there is a need for an infrastructure upgrade or the need for increased capacity. This all has a feedback loop into our planning processes to make sure that we're adequate moving forward and addressing any issues we see. And that feedback loop could come at a cost. It could mean that, hey, to mitigate reliability and do a better job of mitigating reliability in operations, we may require some additional capacity costs. A clear example of that is the PI increase that SPP had to undergo recently.
Planning reserve margin.
Planning reserve margin, right, that's right.
I've got a quick question for you.
Sure.
Do those market impacts occur at every level, or are they triggered at certain alert levels? Or are they present in all alert levels and it's just a matter of the magnitude of those impacts?
Great question. It's largely present at all levels. It's that the market is priced based on supply and demand and what generation it has available. So it's going to try to serve load the cheapest way possible. So it's going to go from the cheapest generation on upward to the most expensive. As supply starts to meet demand very closely in terms of there's just enough supply for demand, you're naturally going to have prices that you're generally going to have prices that are higher because you're on the higher stack of your generation fleet. You've gone to the most expensive end of that generation fleet. So it's in there. It's by design that way. It happens at all time. And I said largely there are some nuances, some things that we do when we get to EA level 2. If we take some operational actions, we go back and we try to make sure that the price formation in our market, because that is really important for incentivizing supply, we do some price modifications after the fact to make sure that the right price signal was sent out. But to answer your question directly, the market platform is not, there's not a button that we push and we say, now you have to be here for this pricing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you finish that?
Yes, I did. So that was all a recap, right, for EAs and so on. So during winter storm, Fern, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess before we go to the next one, I just also want to acknowledge the Missouri Commission and Chair Hunt. We recently made some changes to our alert system, and it was based off of feedback that Chair Hunt and the Missouri Commission provided us so that our alerts can be more helpful and also in unison with the alerts that MISO has. And so there's still some differences, but for the most part, those changes occurred because of the feedback we received from the Missouri Commission. So thank you all for that.
And we are very appreciative, Kim. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll touch up on Fern, winter storm Fern, and just give some factual information here. I'd like to start by saying most of these factual data is preliminary. The timelines are what they are for the most part, but when you look at some of these loads and peak load information, we're still going through making sure that we've captured the right instantaneous moment for load peak and so on. So just treat this information. It is within the range, but it could change a few megawatts here and there. So just wanted to call that out. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so winter storm Fern, it's started for us on the 23rd. We issued a weather advisory on the 23rd. All right, so that's kind of a few days ahead of when what I'd call the window of the event itself. And we generally do this to get ahead and make sure that everyone is aware of some actions and potential progression in those alerts that I talked about and advisories. Actually, before the 23rd, we started doing what's called an uncertainty response action for SPP. And I'll talk a little bit about that. It's a really important component for what SPP does in operations. It's essentially a multi-layered assessment process, and it's designed to identify risks days to weeks in advance, right? And the risks associated with either load forecast risks, those forecasts are forecasts. So we make sure that if the forecast comes in too high for the load side, do we have sufficient resources to meet those obligations? The risk for the generation side is the generation being not available because of forced outages or wind generation being unavailable because the wind forecast could come in too low, and then that would result in higher load forecast, higher load than what's forecasted, lower wind than what's forecasted, and we get into a situation where we have a sufficiency issue. So this approach of what we call uncertainty response team, and this is why Garrett is in the room, he's the manager responsible for that area. It's been really successful for SPP to get in ahead and addressing risks a lot more quantitatively than before. And there's some qualitative ways that we go about doing things, but largely quantitatively. So what we do is we say, what is the risk of these things happening? Load coming in too high, wind coming in too low. And then we assess those and we say, do we have to take some actions earlier than, say, the 23rd of January to actually mitigate those risks and be reliable? And if the answer is yes, we will take those actions. And that's what we would call under the umbrella of a long lead commitment generation, right? So this is the generation that we would commit far in advance to tell them, go get the fuel that you have necessary. You are coming on, and you are coming on the basis that there's some uncertainty in doing that. So that's one component of what we do in operations that helps us go through these events, and we go through this uncertainty response team all year long, which just really is highlighted during these events. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is our generation assessment process. It really leverages the uncertainty component, but it helps us manage generation outages profiles, right? So we say you can't take this many generation outages because during these times of the year, there may be an issue with this condition. There may be an issue with low wind or issue with winter events and so on. So that's a key component of what we do. And all of this leads to potential earlier action than our day ahead market. Why is that important? Why am I calling out the long lead generation? The long lead generation could be the source for uplift in our market. And it could also be the source of, frankly, just making decisions based on mitigating risks. And if those risks don't materialize, it looks like we may have committed too much generation than needed. But that is the cost of mitigating those risks. Because if those risks do materialize, then we have just enough generation. So that is an important thing that we do. And we want it to be as quantitative with it as possible. And generally, we are very successful in justifying that and explaining that to our stakeholders. So with that said, the timeline that you have in front of you, we issued a weather advisory on the 23rd. For the 23rd through the 26th period, we started a resource advisory. So it gets escalated a day later to a resource advisory. So resource advisory allows us some additional tools from the toolbox, including committing reliability unit generation or generation that would otherwise not be committed for economics. We would take those commitments to mitigate risks of not having sufficient generation. And then we did some further long lead commitment generation starting on the 24th, in addition to what was done prior to the 23rd. And then finally, we towards the end of the event, so the middle of the event, I suppose, we all called for conservative operations. The concern there is that we do need to operate conservatively, right? So we do need to manage any transmission outages that may pose a risk for deliverability onto the system, icing risks or generation icing risk, and so on. So that gives us another way to communicate to our stakeholders. We really should be more conservative here. We issued this conservative operations for the 24th, for the 26th, ultimately ended up terminating and expiring those conservative operations advisories on the 26th of January, which is towards the tail end and towards the end of the event, at least for the SPP region. We did not issue any energy emergency alerts. There were no EEAs, which is great. This is kind of where we want to be. We want to use all the tools that we have in our toolbox to keep us from going there, and that's what we did during Winter Storm Fern. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and this is a recap of what I said, but with some data and information. We have instantaneous load peak of about 45 gigawatts on January 24th. Net load peak is something that is really important for us, and I'll briefly explain it. Net load peak means how much load showed up when you take out the wind, right? So the wind is a very variable resource for us in our region. When it's there, it's great. It helps us and we're good. But if the wind comes in low, it could be an issue. So net load peak becomes a really important metric for us. The higher the net load peak means that's the load that has to be served by other generation other than the wind and the solar. Right, so this is the gas generation. These are the coal generation. And that's important because those are the generation we have to make decisions on when to commit them and how far ahead to commit them. Our wind output was around 7 gigawatts, 7,000 megawatts in this case, on January 25. That is about what's accredited for wind in SPP, which is good. They came in as accredited. They came in as planned through our resource planning. But it does pose challenges when we don't see wind exceed the 10 gigs, 15 gigs. And towards the end of this event, or right after, we saw wind come in really strong. and it was a non-issue. We became very resource and energy sufficient. Timeline is that we should issue the resource advisory and conservative operations. To put things in perspective, the previous winter peaks that we've seen, the highest peak that we've seen is last year's winter weather events in February at 48 gigawatts with a net load of 43. So that means 5,000 megawatts of renewables showed up. 43 gigs of net peak is when we start to see some issues and we start to ensure that we have all the generation that we need or close to it available. So just put that in context. We didn't get close to the 48, but it was a high load event, and that the risk was mostly on the generation side we were concerned about. Okay, I'll pause here and see if there are any questions.
Are there any commissioner questions at this point?
Just one quick, remind me, it's a January 21st to 22. That was Winter Storm Uri.
Winter Storm Uri was February 2021.
21, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Commissioner Kochmeyer. I have one. It's probably more of a request. I think I asked this about a year ago or 6 months ago. On your apps and your dashboards, the generation from MISO to SPP, the coloration is different. It would be nice to see the collaboration to get the same colors scheme in both of those apps. You have to go look at the legend every time you want to look at, and I don't look at the app all the time, but when we get into these weather alerts and get into critical situations and we're receiving emails, I start looking at those quite often, sometimes multiple times a day to see, how conditions are improving and what have you. And then you look at the generation and you have to compute, okay, which is this? You can't do it by just color. So that is just a request.
Yeah, that's helpful information. And like I said, we have been working on we have been coordinating with MISO to unify some of our messaging. And so I'm not sure if that was something was looked at. I'm sure it was, but we can bring that back to our comms team to see what changes that we possibly can make to help improve that coordination.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good feedback. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide. And I think I've given enough information and indications. What I'm going to do is, if y'all don't mind, since we already sent the slides out, what I'd like to do is just to go to slide 16, and then go to 18 after that.
I can't see it.
Yeah, just go one more slide.
Okay.
And then I'll say let's stop.
Okay. I don't know.
Excuse us for a minute.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So what's the takeaway from Winter Storm Fern from SPP's perspective? We remained reliable. There were no energy emergency alerts issued, no outages from a capacity view. If there were any, we did hear of some distribution level outages in certain regions, but nothing transmission related. And from our perspective, the power system remained stable during these extreme cold conditions that we saw in our region. Talked about the peak demand. It reached 45 gigawatts. Again, that's a preliminary number. And we'll update it as we go on to the stakeholder process and have some more information internally gathered. It is among the highest, some of the highest winter peaks we see. So anytime we get into this winter peaks of the mid 40s of thousands to the 48,000 obviously being the peak, that is what those are some peak conditions for winter. We did have sufficient resources available to meet the customer needs, considering all the commitments that we've done, and we had appropriate level of resources available. We did think, I talked about the wind generation. Wind generation, icing was a concern throughout this whole event. Wind generation actually performed better than what the icing forecast was indicating, so that was helpful. We did see some generation outages, but it was offset by some of the other risks that didn't materialize or came in favorable. Some of the other elements came in favorable than that, and I would say wind is one that would have compensated for that. We do recognize that this winter storm was impactful beyond just SPP, especially as it started rolling eastward. And we absolutely saw the energy and the demand shift going eastward on the interconnection. So SPP was actually able to export up to 3,500 megawatts to neighboring regions. That is not insignificant for SPP, but we are glad to do that as the RTO that is participating in an Eastern interconnection where we all help each other. We certainly had our fair share of imports into SPP during previous winter events. So here it was glad to see that the market that we have in place incentivized the exports from a pricing standpoint, which aligned well with reliability. And so it's nice to see our systems work well for that. And then I'll go to 18, the slide after that, 2 slides down. Right there, that's good. So sum up a winter storm and talking about some of the coordination and the exports. It really, I'm reminded of all the RTOs that we have and our neighboring entities when it comes to these kind of storms. And it's really reflection of general operation, but especially highlighted during these events. The coordination between the RTOs and ISOs is generally impeccable, right? We have open line of communication. We help each other where needed. And I'm very happy with our coordination. And this really goes back all the way to Winter Storm Uri, when it was really tough. There were some tough decisions made, but it was all in coordination with the other RTOs, and everybody did what they could to help each other. Okay, that is on Winter Storm Fern. I will spend just a few minutes on our 2026 preparedness for the summer. And that's going to be quick because we have not done, I don't have any results to share with you for the summer, but I'll talk about in context what the other summers look like. We generally do experience some resource advisories, at least one conservative operations. Let's go to the slide. You keep going down. Yeah, keep going down 2 more. Yeah, keep going. That's good. All right. We don't have the summer for the 2026 preparedness report done yet, where it's well underway from operations and the team, but it's helpful to talk about the previous summers, what they generally look like. We do experience resource advisories. We do experience conservative operations. It's something is likely to experience this summer. But with that said, our job is to make sure that we do mitigate the escalation and the progression through higher and higher alerts. We had EA1 event in 2024. Last summer, we had 0 EAA events. So that's what we strive for. It's not all in SPP's hand. You know, Mother Nature has something to say about it too. But we absolutely, the plan is to make sure that we have everything ready from a transmission and a capacity standpoint. That takes us to the next slide. How we do that, we really apply a risk-based approach to assessing what the system could look like, knowing the outages that we have in place already. We leverage our generation assessment process that allows us to approve generation outages sufficient enough that it maintains enough capacity online for us to mitigate any risks that we see in the summer. And we do a lot of transmission studies, a lot of transmission hypotheticals on what the impact on reliability in the grid during the various conditions, whether that's low wind, high wind, in various scenarios. Once we are done with these reports, we generally will have sometime in the May timeframe results to share with our stakeholders on essentially a risk assessment and what we think the summer could look like with some probability. So when that's done, we're happy to bring back that report for next quarter to the commission. So yeah, that's that. All right, finally, any questions on the summer preparedness? Sorry, go on to the next one. All right. Hearing none, I'll wrap it up with our NERC long-term reliability assessment. Okay, so the long-term reliability assessment, this is reflected in the report by the MRO. It's a joint effort between SPP, MRO, and NERC has a role in it. Let's go to the map slide. That's the number 25. What you'll notice is that SPP region is considered in the elevated risk region. That's what's indicated by the orange color. So what that means from our view, this is not a point of concern necessarily for SPP to be an elevated risk. It really largely depends on how much generation is able to maintain its posture and stay online for the summer, right? So if we have a lot of forced outages, if we have substandard performance of wind, we could get into conditions where we are in conservative operations or even higher. That's what that means. It really depends on the generation availability and ability to manage that and ability to mitigate any risks with that. So what that means is that we approve just enough maintenance outages in time so that the generation doesn't trip because they didn't get the maintenance outages. It's a very delicate balance that we do in operations. But from our view, we project that we are able to mitigate that within a given forecast of what we think the load peak will be this summer. Last peak or 2 years ago was about 56,000 megawatts. We project that if we are going to peak, and again, it depends on a lot of stuff, it could be around the same ballpark, maybe a little bit higher with additional load. But from our view, there is no imminent risk here of having any events in the summer, but we're planning to make sure that we mitigate that. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with some of the notables from the report from the long-term reliability assessment. SPP, like other regions, we are seeing demand growth, whether that's conventional load growth that exists or whether that's driven by some data requests. And there's a little bit of both. We are seeing tightening reserve margins, right? We have increased the reserve margin, the planning reserve margins recently, but we still see a tightening of that. We do expect that our stakeholders, and we've been working with them to make sure that they have all the tools, all the processes expedited at SPP if needed to make sure that they're able to meet the planning margin. We are seeing delayed in retirement for generation. We're seeing some coal to gas conversion. So what that means is that we're doing everything that we can, and the stakeholders doing everything that we can to remain adequate from a capacity standpoint. Load is really a key component to this. If the load outpaces the ability to retain generation, it could be a problem. For now, we see that we are likely going to keep pace with it, and we have enough efforts in place to make sure that if there's any load, like large loads that comes in and needs interconnection, that they bring generation with them. And finally, I'll talk about some of the load shed risks that you see in the report, because it does jump at me every time I look at that report. There is a risk of zero unserved energy in the report through 2029. So what that means is that it doesn't mean that there's 100% certainty that there is no unserved energy. It means within a given probability defined by MRO and NERC application, but within a reasonable probability that SPP is able to maintain sufficiency through 2029, although we're seeing reserves margins tightening up. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I hope this was helpful and informational, and I will take any questions from the commission.
You may want to give some background on the information, where this information came from for the report, and just a background on the NERC report.
Yeah, so we every season the MRO works with SPP to collect information from our resource adequacy. That's generation, load forecast, various things, and they do that for all other regions. And then they go through an assessment of what they think each region is looking like from how they're posturing for the next several years. So it's largely dependent on a lot of the information that we give, a lot of the input that we give. They do some assessment of that, and they standardize, like, for example, the probabilities of how to standardize, okay, what is the risk of having unserved energy? If you look in the report, there are other regions that have some risk of unserved energy. SPP is not one of them. But generally, it depends and it's relying on data that ISOs and the RTOs submit to that report. And they do a good job of standardizing it and give a good qualitative assessment for each region. The report is available out there. I don't know that I included the link here. We're happy to share the link, but it is out there and available.
Are there any commissioner questions? Not hearing any. Are there staff questions? Go ahead, Adam.
Hi, this is Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission, and I know I've spoken to just about everybody on the SPP staff over there. We appreciate you all being available today. I'm going to go backwards. Slide 25 on the SPP region, talking about the NERC LTRA, are the eras, which is, some expedited generation interconnection filing information and other similar generation additions included in that report?
That's a good question. So what is included is what's projected to be accredited or accredited. Actually bring up a good point. I had some talking points on that for how SPP is able to mitigate and manage some of the risks moving into 2029, knowing that the growing demand. The errors or the expedited resource adequacy process or the tier 2 queue that we have in place for shovel-ready generation, as we call it, is certainly a tool that has helped stakeholders to get generation online and have interconnection service as soon as they can. Whether those are included or not will depend on what we project in their accreditation to be, and I don't have a specific answer what's included in there or not, but I will say that those processes that you talked about, Adam, there is certainly processes that were leveraged by several stakeholders to make sure that they maintain and keeping up with the PRM increases.
Okay, and kind of a follow-up. Do you use this LRTA in your processes?
We generally, that's a good question. I don't know that we use it directly, and I have to get back with you on that because that is our resource adequacy team. What we do is we have a lot of information, a lot of models, and a lot of things that we do, hypotheticals, and we feed some information to the MRO for them to generate this report. We may use it as informational, we may use it as interesting findings of what MRO's perspective and the NERC's probabilities perspective of resource adequacy, but I'm not sure that we use it directly in making any decisions. That helps.
Okay. And to go back to your EEA discussion, which has a lot of really good detail, when does SPP hit scarcity pricing or the increased pricing?
Good question. So we, at any given day, with or without those EAs, we will hit scarcity pricing. And we'll hit it for various reasons, not necessarily capacity related, but it could be that we have just enough generation and they're not moving fast enough, for example, from minute to minute and so on. So those are what I would call transient scarcity pricing. So those happen and occur every day. Scarcity pricing from a non-transient standpoint, from a capacity and energy adequacy view, it can happen at any given time. So for example, in Winter Storm Fern, we did see elevated energy prices. And those elevated energy prices, they, without going into too many details, I'm happy to, just without not having the time, we have various products that if they go scarce, like our reserve products, that impact of those scarcity pricing for those reserve products cascade to the energy price. So you would see a reflection of energy prices getting higher as the reserve products get scarce, even 5 minutes to 5 minutes, even on a transient basis. There is not a trigger. There's not a EA1 indicates we have to be in this scarcity pricing. We can be in EA2 and be just fine and have lower prices than, say, EA1. It's the demand and supply driven at any given time in our market.
Thank you, Yasser. This is Walt Cecil, work with Adam. Just drawing a blank.
how does the scarcity pricing mechanism work? Does it escalate as the emergency worsen? And then I'll follow up from there.
Yeah, it does not escalate. Scarcity pricing is agnostic in SPP to grid conditions. Grid conditions being that if we're conservative ops, it doesn't mean that the market system that generates prices knows that it needs to be at some level of pricing. There is no price floor or price requirement as you escalate operational conditions. Now, from a market standpoint, we like to see what I call price action by the supply and demand. Those are the two entities that are responsible for pricing in our market. We like to see price action reflect the conditions that we're in, right? They're independent things. There's no tie between the grid condition and your pricing. But the reason why we like to see the price action trend in the same direction as in escalating conditions is because as we tap into the more expensive generation, it means that we were in the right conservative or the right grid condition because the supply was tightening up. And if the supply tightens up, if you have that generation that would otherwise not be dispatched, now has to be dispatched because high demand, and that generation is offering, for example, $400 a megawatt hour, then likely you'll see energy prices at $400 a megawatt hour because we implement what's called the marginal pricing. It's the last resource that gets dispatched, sets the price for the region.
FERC has a soft cap of $1,000 per megawatt hour
Correct.
under emergency conditions and a hard cap of 2,000. What determines the price when you have to exceed that? Is that a demand curve issue? What's your protocol?
Good question. So FERC order 831 established a price cap of 1,000. If it goes over 1,000, which we have seen some resource offer above $1,000 during Winter Storm Fern, and they were, I think I can say they were approved. So that means that they could offer in above $1,000. What determines if they can go above $1,000 is our market monitoring goes one by one to make sure that those offers above $1,000 are reasonable and are backed by information that makes that offer legitimate, right? It makes that offer beyond just speculative offer, right? So it's bringing the receipt from the gas fuel that you procured and saying, this is what it cost me, and therefore my price is $1,200 to pay for that fuel. So if we go through the 1,200, for example, if we go beyond the price offer cap and it gets approved, now that generation becomes, hypothetically, the most expensive generation in our fleet. If we dispatch that generation at 1,200, all the prices in our market will likely be 1,200. Transmission has a role in all of this and deliverability and so on, but generally that's how that works. The 2,000 is the hard cap, as you called it. So that means there's no waiver to allow somebody to offer beyond $2,000. That's just the hard cap.
So your maximum LMP would be 2,000 under those conditions then?
Our maximum LMP under those conditions will be somewhere in the $6,000 region because of the other products and the cascading nature of our pricing.
And do you define areas where the scarcity pricing applies and other areas where it doesn't? Or does it apply footprint wide?
It's footprint wide. They all have the same demand curve, same violation relaxation limits. It's for the whole region.
Last question. When you have to declare a load shed, who makes the decision on which circuits are pulled?
Good question. So when we declare a load shed, it's a coordination between the reliability coordinator and our balancing coordinator. The balancing coordinator is the coordinator that is responsible for our balancing authority function. Various decisions go into that, but simply put, it is what we call a load ratio share. We go through all the TOPs that we have on our footprint, and we have all of that predetermined in our load shed application that we don't use very often, which is a good thing. But then we say, okay, we need 500 megawatt of load shed for the region. Each TOP gets a load ratio share of that. And the TOP gets to determine what circuits are open up to meet the load ratio share obligation of that load shed.
Okay. You're up. One other question, and I'm sorry, I'm going back to scarcity pricing. In the day ahead market, LMP is determined by supply equaling demand. Suppose that a generator makes an offer, clears the market, is committed, and then scarcity pricing is later invoked. What price does that generator receive? The LMP from the marketplace in the day ahead, or the scarcity price?
Okay, good question. So generation that participates in the day ahead market, all generation gets paid in the day ahead market, and it gets compared to their real-time position. So a generator that sits at 500 megawatt and got paid $1,000 in the day ahead market. Let's make it simple. Let's make it smaller. $600 in the day ahead market. So you have 500 megawatt generator, got $600 for every megawatt in the day ahead market. If that generator shows up and is dispatched to the same amount of megawatt, 500 megawatt in this case, then they are indifferent to the real-time pricing. The real-time pricing could be $10,000. What we do in the real time is we say, what was your position difference between the day ahead and real time? And that is what's settled in real time. You're dispatched the same exact way. Your day ahead market is your position that you take and nothing else.
Thank you. That helps.
So, Walt, I think you asked some great questions, and I think it may be helpful and beneficial for us to share this type of material with COG as a whole and provide some foundational and understanding of pricing mechanisms.
Yeah.
Kim and Yasser, Rich Germinder with the commission. Just real quick, and this is both for SPP and for MISO. I think it'd be helpful if MISO and SPP provided some either best practices or suggestions on what commissions can do to communicate information on grid status as you work through those different levels. Whether we should make social media requests and, alerting customers to grid conditions, some things that you see from the entirety of your footprint that maybe other commissions do, just sharing that with us and with others would be helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. We'll get that for you.
Are there any other questions for SPP at this time? Did you have more, Walt?
Yeah, staff just asked a question. Do you have any statistics on your natural gas pipeline capacities during winter peaks?
Good question. I'm not going to say a definite no, I don't know. I don't think we have great information on pipeline capacity. Visibility into gas pipeline continues to be something that we could improve on, but it's not for the lack of effort from SPP's view. It's just the ability to coordinate that information. But that's a good question.
And I'm sorry to do this to you. One other question. How do you, what do you consider wildfires to be? Are those weather events or some other kind of event? And how do you treat them under emergency conditions?
Great question. So wildfires, I would put them in the weather category. We have situational awareness and maps to tell us where the fires are. Generally with wildfires, what we get concerned about is locational impact, right? So if you have fire in a given area and it takes out transmission lines or has impact transmission lines and capacity, even if you have capacity, say in the South region to help fire and to help demand in the North because of fires, what we get concerned about is their impact on transmission. And impact on transmission means that deliverability becomes a concern. But to answer your question, we would issue a weather event. We would likely even maybe issue, if it's severe enough, for conservative operations and start taking some action like delaying outages, making sure that if there's a transmission outage that's going to go on outage, but could help if there's a risk of a transmission line being impacted by fire, we could take those actions.
Thank you, Yasser. I'm done.
Yeah.
And Walt, of course, you can send any follow-up questions. Any of you all can send any follow-up questions to us, and we can ensure that you get a response. So just let us know.
Are there any other stakeholder questions for SPP at this time? All right, let's move on then. Thank you very much for that presentation, and we'll move on to MISO. And we'll give you just a second to get set up, but if you would also introduce yourself before you begin, that would be helpful. Your mic is muted when you get ready. We still have you on mute.
Can you guys hear us now?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you guys also see the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, at least the presentation piece was working here, so apologies for that. I'm gonna turn it over to my boss, Bob Kuzman.
Well, as I ran up down the stairs, I'm starting ready to go now. So thank you very much, Bob Kuzman, Executive Director for the Central Region. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Mitchell for his time and service at OMS. We greatly appreciate his time. Commissioner Kolkmeyer, I heard your question, and I'm happy to work with Ms. Wynn to work on the maps and also the other question that was raised by Rich on the messaging issue. We can work with Ms. Wynn and get those accomplished for you.
Sounds good. That's great. Thank you.
Not a problem. Next slide. These are the couple of topics that I'll cover. I'll start with the Winter Storm Fern and then work our way through this agenda. Mason Bleem will take over after I'm done on the winter storm. But before I start on the winter storm, a couple things real quick. First, I want to thank SPP for the great communication and also our friends at PJM during this storm. A lot of people say that we don't cooperate with each other, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. We had wonderful help from SPP and help from PJM during this storm, and the communication was very valuable during Storm Fern. Yesterday, JT Smith gave a high level, and mine will be a high level of Winter Storm Fern. We're still digging into the details and working on lessons learned. Each storm presents different scenarios in which we all learn from. So we will continue to update stakeholders on the process as we continue to revisit Storm Fern during our takeaways. Just a quick summary, Winter Storm Fern brought extreme cold, snow, and ice across the MISO footprint, which created operational challenges, some forecasting errors, and unit unavailability and low wind production. To maintain reliability, we did go to a 2C, which was declared on January 24th, and I will walk you through the 2C declaration in a couple slides. And obviously, what I talked about earlier, MISO is actively engaging in solutions to address the challenges that arose during the storm. As SPP talked about, our operators, through communication to everybody across the RTOs and with our stakeholders in preparing, we always work long in advance of this storm coming. Just to sort of walk you through the events that happened at MISO, we issued a cold weather alert on the 23rd, conservative ops on the 23rd, and conservative ops for our south through the 30th and the February 1st. When we enter those different alerts, that sends specific messages to our members and to the general public of what is going on at MISO to trigger certain scenarios. And Mason will walk you through later on in the deck some of those emergency procedures that each alert or event causes. We also included in the back of our deck abbreviations with definitions and glossaries. So if there's any questions on the back of our deck, there should be the acronyms with the definitions. As the storm started to come through MISO, we noticed some issues which we're going to talk about in the next few slides. We issued a capacity advisory and a max gen warning for the North and Central. The North and Central hasn't been in the max gen area in a long time, or if it has, it hasn't been for this long period of time. So we actually have been in max gens, but getting further down in the max gen events, the North and the Central haven't been really accustomed to this. So as we got through the 24th, this is where we got into new territory, sort of in the North and Central, where we started walking through the different steps on the 24th to get us through Winter Storm Fern. The most important thing is the lights stayed on and we stayed reliable. Thanks to our members and all the people that work in our operations centers and the people that work in operations centers. Mason, if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to sort of compare, while all occurring in January the last 3 years, each winter event has sort of unique characteristics that require different actions. I sort of list those 3 events, but we can look at total at Storm Fern. Our peak that day was 105 gigawatts. We had about 6 gigawatts of unplanned outages, and which you'll see in the next chart, we did utilize 2 gigawatts of LMRs. Our north-south transfer, and again, thanks to SPP allowing us to go over that limit for a while, we moved 4 gigawatts south to north. And you can see our average daily wind generation was about 3.1 gigs, and we have a tad over 30 gigs of wind in our footprint. Next slide. This is a great eye chart. So this view is sort of what our operators are seeing as we progress through January 23rd into January 24th. And we sort of labeled on the bottom, step 1, step 2A, and then when we got to step 2C. If you take a look at the blue line, that is the actual where we fell and what megawatts we did dip below that 0 at about 1800. If you look at the green dotted line that sort of goes across, that was what was supposed to planned in the day ahead and the real-time market. You can see the significant difference. Going into Friday, we started seeing the problem arise when we had about 12 to 13 gigawatts come offline, which then took that dotted line a lot lower than we anticipated. The issue at that point is when we realized that the day ahead market the next day had already cleared. And so that's when we started going into our emergencies. step one started about early in the morning and worked in the way through step 2A. The yellow bar that you see at about 6 a.m. that ran for a while when we got into 2C, those were the 2,000 megawatts of LMRs that were called and performed. We also, at that point, under 2C, and I'll get back to the public notification here in a second, which is going to be a lesson learned, but I'll come back to that in a minute. That's also when we can issue emergency pricing, and we purchased power at that point from PJM to get through that ramp up period into noon. As the operators continue to look at the situation, they realized coming into the evening that we were going to have to get back to 2C, mainly to purchase emergency power that they knew they had from PJM. We had some questions in the stakeholder process yesterday that asked us, why didn't we call those LMRs again rather than purchasing the emergency power? We could have called them. However, in a 24-hour period in our tariff, they do not have to perform. There's no obligation to perform. So the operators made the choice of rather taking, will they show up or not? They took the opportunity to purchase that known power to make sure we encourage the lights stay on. And as the storm passed from west to east, we moved out of the emergency. It's a very good eye chart. It sort of gives the real-time approach of what our operators were dealing with during the day. Well, I'm happy to answer any more questions. We're going to continue to refine that chart. I can answer the questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to continue to refine that chart and spend more time with this at the stakeholder process. Significant unplanned outages caused the extreme cold, contributed to the need for the MISO to commit all valuable resources. As you can see on the side, in the north central regions, 29 CTs increased their start time significantly on January 23rd. 13 of those remained under the 24-hour notification threshold to maintain their maximum accreditation value. As everybody, people know that we have changed our accreditation value to show up when needed in those hours. We are looking at, did that provide a disincentive to keep the accreditation hours rather than looking at should they perform in those situations? And that will be brought to the stakeholder process as we evaluate. Again, a high level look at this point. We still have a lot more to dig in. But if you look on the left side of the chart, the days, the green was the committed in the day ahead and that the committed in the real-time market, but you can see what actual generation showed up. And as we continued to go through the emergency, we lost more and more committed units as the storm progressed. Those could have been storm related, other reasons. At this point, we're still digging in and looking at those points. Next slide, please. MISO experienced significant unplanned outages due to the extreme cold, obviously mostly in the north. And you can see the unplanned outages early on based on the same day. You can sort of see that line of the same day outages, and it affected every type of resource that we have, except for we do not have batteries added to that. We do have battery resources, and we did not add solar in there at this point. But you can see the unplanned outages continue to increase as the days went on. The peak day on 124, we had 44 gigawatts of unplanned outages and or derates. Next slide. So after every storm, just like at every place that we work, we always look at challenges that impacted operations during the winter storm. We did have great proactive communication with our friends from the east and west and our south. We did bring in extra operators, including dual qualified operators to ensure that we had the right personnel here. And then as we talked about the coordination, not only from PJM, but also from SPP. Sort of the lessons learned, I think are important, and this is very confusing to a lot of our members, and we need to work on this, is one of the public appeal. When MISO declares 2C, it specifically says to do a public appeal. We are looking at that because some people did public appeals, some people didn't. And did we really need a public appeal? Because the only reason we were getting to 2C is to get that emergency power from PJM. So we're reevaluating those steps because it caused a lot of confusion, and we accept that as a takeaway and a lesson learned. We're now working with our communications team, our operations team, and our operators to figure out what's the best way to do that. I mean, at 6:00 a.m. in the morning, I'm not sure how much a public appeal on energy would actually work, because most people, and that's 6:00 Eastern, that's 5 a.m. in Jeff City. So we need to look and address that. Pricing, we had some issues with our LMPs, our day ahead, our real time, and our MOM report, which is the report that looks forward, were delayed throughout this storm. Why did that happen? We need to get to the bottom of that and make sure that happens. And then our emergency pricing issues that we have to deal with, and we will continue to deal with. I can assure you that operations and our market development team are working together to start looking at some of these problems, and I'm sure we'll see those addressed and brought to our stakeholder process. So that's a little bit of our high-level approach to what happened during Storm Fern. If you'd like to stop here before Mason goes into sort of our emergency procedures, which will sort of tie all this together, I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Are there any commissioner questions at this time?
I do have a question, Judge.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Morning, Bob
Good morning.
and Mason. Thank you for the presentation so far. Just want to say that the communication from MISO during this event was really helpful. Got some really good information, not only via email to us, but also in phone calls to kind of describe the situation. But one thing I think that maybe we continue to see is transmission constraints from north to south. So can you talk about that and what's being done to address that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Commissioner. I will have to take that back. Laura and Aubrey are leading that charge. During this storm, with the cooperation of our joint parties and SPP, they allowed us to utilize more path from south to north in this storm. It just goes to show that we can all work together in times of need. And we work together all the time, I should say. So it's important that we do that. But if I can take that question and get back to you on that, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be great. I know this topic continues to come up
does.
time and time again. And last time I think we talked about it, the feedback from MISO was that this was a a contractual issue for the amount of transmission capacity. That was probably a year ago now.
Yep.
So let's just try to focus on that a little bit.
Yes, it is. The contract path is on a contract. There is more megawatts to move, but the contract is the contract on this issue. but I will get you a better answer than that.
That would be great. Thanks, Bob.
No problem.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Thanks, Bob. This is really helpful. And I don't have as much a question as I do a comment that I think we'll be very interested in having a better understanding of the unplanned outages and how and why those occurred at this level. And I'm kind of always developing this worry about the availability of fuel and the generator's ability to commit fuel kind of in the same timeframes as the peak loads are occurring and those generators are being dispatched. So I'll be looking forward to having more conversation with you about how those outages occurred and are there some things we can be doing better to help to help with those?
Yeah, as my friends from SPP brought up, some of the issues on the gas side continue to peer their heads when we have sort of these storms and the gas electric coordination. These storms tend to happen on the weekends, which cause some issues too. But yes, be happy to continue to update you on the unplanned outages and some of the reasons behind them.
I appreciate that.
Are there any other commissioner questions?
Yes, Judges, Commissioner Kochmeyer.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Judge. Bob, I want to thank you and SPP for your presentations today. They've been very good. I just have one more comment to add. Missouri is, as you know, is unique because it has both SPP and MISO in it. So kind of to add to my request, I mean that we're a little unique where other states are not. So
and we do work well together. That's the important thing. So
and that's great. That's great. Absolutely.
Both our responsibilities to keep the lights on, and
yes.
we take that as a very important task.
Good, because we hear it when they're out.
Yes.
And did staff have some questions that at this time? Good. Well, be sure and speak toward the mic if you don't mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Good to hear your voice. Going back to slide 9 real quick. You've got a category called other, and then it's identified as gray, and you've got what I perceive to be 2 shades of gray. Could you help me figure out what you're trying to communicate there?
Yeah, I just noticed that also, Walt. I would have to get back to JT on that. I will do that. I apologize. He might have addressed that yesterday in the RSC and I missed it, so I apologize.
Okay, and a follow-up real quick.
Sure.
On the footnotes, you have a category called urgent enforced outages. Is there something different with urgent? I don't understand that descriptor.
I think JT explained that yesterday. Is urgent would be stuff that is in supplemental the supplemental or spinning resources, but I need to check on that for you, Walt.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay.
Thank you. I will turn this over to Mr. Mason Blaine.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bob, and thank you, members of the commission and staff here today. I just wanted to do a quick couple slides here just to cover our emergency procedures and talk a little bit about our communications here at MISO out to our members and stakeholders. So on this chart, I want to start out by saying these are emergency operating procedures to address adverse conditions. These are what signals those conditions out to our stakeholders, the members, to the commissions, to everybody else who might sign up actually for those types of alert. And what you see here is not only the status, but as you work your way over from left to right, how that communication goes out to those stakeholder groups and what actions might be required. So this one's really narrowly tailored really to our operations out to the member utilities on how to approach those types of events. I did want to just note, as it popped up on my alert here, I got a push notification from our MISO app, but we did declare a severe weather alert today. So it's actually right in that green area as a way that we do advance communication out. It does impact Ameren, Missouri, so that's one of the affected regions here, but as a part of that alert, expected conditions are damaging winds, tornadoes with the possibility of a few reaching EF2 strength. So keeping an eye on the weather patterns that are occurring across our large geographical footprint. So just wanted to note that as it was kind of a unique opportunity to highlight what it means when a severe weather alert is activated. So that's really just in the green stage where we're providing that situational awareness. And that really operates really from the situational awareness standpoint through the yellow area. Now, what Bob was alluding to earlier is when we do get into the energy emergency alerts, 1, 2, 3, those do go all the way up to 5. At this last one, we were in a maximum generation. So we were technically in a max gen alert under event step 2, which is an EEA2. And we were not, we went through the process of going through a 2A, a 2B, and a 2C. So as you can see, there's various different action elements within each different step. So I just wanted to highlight that because under the event 2C is where we are doing emergency energy purchases. But to Rich's point earlier, that is where we also activate our call to our members and sometimes that communication out to our commissions or sometimes the commissions through energy offices or governor's offices, whether or not to take a public appeal for conservation efforts. And there was some confusion that this last time, and we're going to be addressing that through our stakeholder process. I do have some slides in the appendix that get a little bit more into depth and break this out really well. But that's really the overview of our market capacity energy procedure steps. So on the next slide here, I did want to just differentiate between our two alerts. We do distinguish between our capacity emergency and also our transmission system emergency. So capacity emergency does occur when there's not enough generation to meet demand. And typically that is linked to weather type of events. And we usually see out of those types of events our summer and winter peaks that we plan for. We do follow on the slide that I had just shown you prior. We do follow those maximum generation alerts, and those maximum generation alerts from MISO align with NERC's EEA process. And they're supported with various types of communication. So during the most recent Winter Storm Fern event, the commissioners and staff would have received direct emails from us. And we also have that information pushed out differently, not only through our app, but also on our grid gauge, on our dashboard that's on the website, and through other types of email notifications. Now, transmission system emergency, that's when there's an identifiable violation on the transmission system. It does happen really quickly, sometimes without public declarations, and it does require pretty quick corrective action. So we follow the transmission system emergency process for those types of events, and we do that directly with our transmission operators. So I do want to highlight some of the proposed changes that are already underway, and we'll be incorporating some of those more changes as we work through the stakeholder process from lessons learned from Winter Storm Fern. But prior to the arrival of Winter Storm Fern, we were already looking to take our maximum generation procedures and simplify them to truly align with the NERC EEA steps. So we already did align with those steps, but we broke them out into several different internal steps at MISO. So we're actually moving towards simplifying that process. I know I celebrated hearing about this change because In a past life, I was a staff member of the Iowa Utilities Commission. And we also had both SPP and MISO as our RTOs. And so similar to what you were saying, Commissioner Kochmeyer, it was really helpful to see that there was some simplification happening on one of the RTOs to help better understand the process that we were going through. So some of those proposed changes currently underway is to eliminate that maximum generation alert and moving procedures from step 1A, where it's a commitment of emergency only resources, from a step 1 to a maximum generation warning. And then also simplifying steps 3 and 4 to merge with step 2. And then step 5 is going to be renamed to a step 3. So you can see kind of on that sliding scale, moving left to right, some of the steps that we are taking out and merging together. So with that, I had already mentioned this, but several ways to view our MISO real-time grid status and subscribe to those notifications. We, of course, have the full dashboard of real-time operations notifications from the markets to LMP prices to grid conditions on the website. We also provide all of that in a condensed format, but can be expanded to view all of the information on the app. It will also push you notifications. And then, of course, you can follow us on social media as well on LinkedIn and Facebook, or excuse me, on Twitter, which is now X, not Facebook. So I did want to pause there to see if there was any questions, and if there's not, I'll go into our weather outlook.
Any commission questions at this point? I do think staff has a question. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, just real quick, Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission. Mason, you talked about some concern about when the public gets notified during EEA2. Your proposed changes change when the public gets notified for a request to conserve?
Adam, this is Bob Kuzman from MISO. Adam, we're working on that now with operations and communications. I think everything's going to be done through, and we'll bring this to the stakeholders as we implement this new process that we're still working on. What is going to be sort of more of a check the box on the forms that we send to the operators that are in each individual utility that are control in the control room, and they'll have to coordinate that with their members, with their communications team, so that we just simplify it and create like a laundry list of check boxes that we're going to deal with the operators. That's what we're working towards, Adam. It has not been clarified at this point.
Let me ask a simpler question.
Yep.
But is NERC the one who requires you to
Yes.
reach out in EEA2?
Yes.
And I guess I'm confused if you have to do it at the EEA2.
We do.
Do you get variance on whether or not it's at the start of EEA2 or 3 hours into EEA2?
We do not get that variance unless we work with NERC, obviously. But I think we're trying to figure out a way to simplify this and the public awareness. So we're worried that we just utilized EA2 in this instance to get the emergency power from PJM. We really did need the public notice at that point. So that's where the confusion lies with EA2. So we still need to work through where we call that public notice. But if we go to EA2, under the NERC rules, we have to do a public notification. So there is the what we're trying to figure out at MISO, how to simplify that. Hopefully I answered your question.
I think you got as close as you personally can.
Yes. I appreciate that. JT is the one, and I will have JT circle back with you on this answer.
Okay, and for the record, on that day, I was watching the noon news and I did see the appeal from both Ameren and City of Columbia announced. So
yep.
I will tell you it did get out.
Yes, it did.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you once again, Mason Bloom here with MISO. Just to share a little bit about the weather outlook for spring and summer. We are looking for spring. This is just weather related, similar to SPP. We'll have a much more robust summer preparedness presentation that comes a little bit later in the year. But right now, as our outlook, as we are nearing spring, is that normal temperatures are expected in our MISO Central during the spring months. So we are anticipating that for the Central region. That Central region includes the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri. While above normal precipitation is expected, as forecasted from NOAA, severe weather does look to be elevated in the southern Midwest and also northern South this spring here. So for the summer, we could see normal temperatures in MISO Central region. So we are anticipating really a kind of a hot, dry type of summer. Precipitation is expected to trend near normal. But we are closely monitoring that, of course, with drought conditions. Any questions there for us?
Any questions from the commissioners or staff? Don't see any. Continue.
All right. So our last piece of our presentation here, and I might phone a friend for some assistance from Bob on a few of the slides here, but I did want to take the opportunity to cover the NERC long-term reliability assessment. And so just to kind of start out with, our resource adequacy planning here at MISO occurs over multiple time horizons. And what this slide shows you is sort of that outlook from a real-time operations to how the data head market fits into that, all the way out to our member and state resource planning horizon. And it's ultimately to ensure sufficient resources are available during the grid operations itself. So along the dotted lined box there, I wanted to call out three in particular ones, which we placed the most emphasis on our OMS MISO survey and also our resource adequacy planning, our PRA auction, and also our seasonal resource assessments.
And if I interject there, our capstone survey that we utilize the most is the OMS MISO survey. As you know, in the MISO footprint, resource adequacy is handled by our states and our state commissions. So we rely on the OMS MISO survey as our point of reference on how we're moving forward in the next year. The NERC report is the NERC report, and we utilize the OMS MISO survey.
Yeah, and our primary objective for this construct is to ensure, obviously, that we do have those sufficient resources to ensure that the lights stay on. And so as you can see here from the planned resource auction, it's our mechanism to facilitate that procurement of capacity to meet reliability requirements at economically efficient prices. And the next PRA results that we'll be speaking before the commission at our next quarterly meeting, those PRA results will actually come out in the late April timeframe. And so we are scheduled to be in front of the commission in May, and we'll be covering those results with you and also in advance of that meeting as well. Our OMS MISO survey, the next report is due out in the summer of 26 here. And that's a survey of all of our market participants to establish resource adequacy projections. As Bob mentioned, that is definitely one of focus for MISO. So the NERC LTRA, we do provide that information with the Midwest Reliability Organization, as SPP had mentioned, MRO, and some of the other reliability partners that are subsets of NERC. And so we do that in coordination with those regional entities to perform that assessment once per year for the bulk power system in North America. The next report is due out in winter 26-27 area. So a little bit of background, NERC released the 2025 Long-Term Reliability Assessment, the LTRA, on January 28th of this year. As you can see by the red, the report currently labels MISO as high risk for winter 28. Because planned projects from eras were not included in the analysis, MISO believes the risk should be called elevated instead of high. And that is because, as I just mentioned, the concern is for the 28-29 planning years and not in the next 2 years. The report is updated every year, so there is time to act before any sort of risk becomes real. There's several observations regarding the interpretation of risk for the MISO region in the most recent assessment to question applying the high risk designation. For example, the assessment does not anticipate an expected supply-demand mismatch until the winter of 28, as I mentioned, and it does not incorporate generation resources expected to come online through our expedited resource addition study, also known as ERAS, process prior to winter 28-29. The ERAS process was developed collaboratively by state regulators, MISO, and our stakeholders. It's already well underway, and it is expected to address emerging capacity needs in the near to medium term. The assessment, NERC's own assessment at page 16, even acknowledges that ERA additions would mitigate an identified winter arm shortfall if approximately 8.6 gigawatt of winter on-peak capacity reaches operation as projected. And again, that's not reflected in the primary assessment findings. I want to just thank our partnership with Commissioner Mitchell and OMLS on getting ERAS underway, and our continued collaboration really should be highlighted across the MISO footprint. Regulated utilities and state commissions coordinate that demand growth, retirements, and new generation development as a part of really integrated resource planning, and in many of our states, and approval processes for the vast majority of the MISO footprint. And that ensures that reliable considerations are addressed holistically. So with that being said here, that is really all that we have for takeaways for the LTRA, but just wanted to reemphasize that the 2025 PRA results and surveys.
Mason, I just interrupt you for a second. Before we move off that topic, I had a couple questions for you. If that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I'm curious, kind of understanding and knowing that the LTRA is really a risk assessment and not a forecast, and understanding that there were a number of factors that were excluded from the report that I think contributed to the high risk designation. I'm curious what kinds of discussions, if any, is MISO having with DOE on how that report may be used or how that report may be interpreted. And I think my worry about it is it may formulate the basis for additional 202D orders that may not be necessary. So I'm curious if you're talking to DOE about that. And
I'm gonna phone a friend with Bob here today.
Thanks, Commissioner. The answer to the question, yes. And if you notice the new 202 that came out for the Campbell plant in Michigan referred to it. So we need to continue to work with our friends at NERC and the DOE to continue to explain to them that we've got this and our state commissions have this. And there are resource adequacy planners. So yes, the communication's there. Our CEO has communicated that with also the head of NERC. I want to thank OMS for helping us identify some of the issues with the NERC report. and we will continue to educate as much as we possibly can on this. It's just the question is, are we being heard?
Sure, sure. And just a follow-up to that, we had a opportunity to sit down for a few minutes with NERC when we were at the NARUC meeting, and you know, one of the things that they mentioned is, at least I interpreted what they mentioned, is that part of the reason that the ERAS projects weren't addressed in the report is that they had to close the window to get data from MISO so that they could get their report done on time. And I guess my question is, do you think it would make any sense to try to accelerate the submission of data to NERC so that it better lines up with their deadlines for getting their report done? And I think, you know, if we could do that, it might eliminate some of, you know, the misunderstanding of data, or, you know, data that just isn't quite available yet when they need to move forward with their report.
The answer is yes. We will continue to work with NERC in providing the most accurate and updated material. We did provide what was in ERAS to them. ERAS had kicked off as the point of the NERC, whatever he used, the hard line, I think, that he used during the OMS meeting at NERC. So I think they just assumed it, and I shouldn't put words in NERC's mouth, so I'll be careful here. Bob's opinion is they just didn't think that those projects potentially would come to fruition. They've had experiences with that before, and these projects had RERA approval and were to address specific load or resource adequacy needs. So these projects are moving forward rather quickly. We have moved 10 of them through. 15 more have started, and we'll be kicking off another 15 in March. So these projects are projects that are shovel ready. Use the term SPP used, and they are moving forward rather quickly to provide those necessary megawatts to the system.
Yeah, I understand. And I think, you know, with the emphasis on shovel ready and communicating that to NERC, I think would be helpful.
Point taken. Thank you.
So with that does conclude our presentation. Happy to take any more questions. Turn back over to the commission.
Thank you. Are there other commissioner questions this time? Not hearing any. Are there further staff questions?
This is Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission again. On 21 and 22, you talk about using the NERC long-term reliability assessment, and Commissioner Mitchell knocked out almost all my questions about the long-term reliability assessment, except for this one. How do you use it, and what do you use it for?
Yeah, we do not use the NERC LTRA, but we participated and provide the information to the regional entities.
Kick back to 21 then, slide 21. I guess I'm trying to understand the dotted yellow.
Yeah, I just listed it on there to kind of show what the next slide was going to show. So I apologize for that confusion. Where the lines drawn from the years from the circles over to the right side with the labeling, those are the things that MISO uses.
Adam, to answer your question, we don't use it. The two studies, the OMS MISO survey, PRA, and the seasonal resource assessments is what MISO utilizes because we work with that with our commissioners.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I didn't think you used the LRTA, so maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, that probably the box should probably be drawn. I think the meaning for the box was, Adam, that we have to participate in providing them the data, but we don't utilize the results.
Any other questions? I'm not hearing, oh,
I guess I
Commissioner
do have
Mitchell,
one.
go ahead.
And if you want to take a pass on this question, it's fair. But so if we don't use the report, what does NERC use the report for?
I'm
You
gonna go
know?
ahead and take a pass
I
on
don't
that.
know.
I'm gonna go ahead and take a pass on that question. At this point, let's just leave it at that.
Fair enough.
Any other questions from anyone? Not seeing any. Again, we appreciate your presentation. Any last words from any of the commissioners?
I do have just one comment, and I just I want our RTOs to know that one, we really appreciate the communication and the collaboration here, and secondly, you know, we recognize that you've done a lot of work. We've got a lot of work yet to do, but our last winter storm was a monster. I mean, it was a life-threatening situation, and I think both of our RTOs stepped up to the plate and performed, and it uncovered a few raw spots that we need to work on, and we'll do that as we move forward. But we appreciate your hard work and appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presentations, and I believe our next quarterly gathering is set tentatively, at least, for May 28th. So we look forward to hearing from you again then. If there's nothing further, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.